Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's a special episode of the Monday Show on a Thursday. We just had to come on and record after Newcastle thumped PSG 4-1 in the Champions League. It still doesn't sound real, but ladies and gents, you're not dreaming. It really did happen. Newcastle United 4, PSG 1. I'm Andrew Musgrove. I'm joined by our Newcastle United editor, Aaron Stokes. And Newcastle United, well, they're just a little bit mint, aren't they, Aaron? And here's a take for you, okay? This might have been the best game I've ever seen at St James's Park in 30 years of going to that great stadium. Nothing has beaten what I saw last night. Everything from the players and the approach on the pitch to the fans and the terraces, it was like in unison. I've seen games where Newcastle have got the tactics spot on, but the atmosphere has maybe been a little bit flat. I've seen United win games when they've been awful, but the crowd have made the difference. I'm thinking that Chelsea game when there was a last-minute header from Hayden, wasn't it? I think it was. And of course, I've seen games where the atmosphere and on-field action has been superb, but nothing like last night. From the word go, PSG were absolutely rattled. And to you guys, the fans, don't underestimate the role you had to play in that last night. Don't let anyone talk you down. What a fantastic night. Aaron, how'd you sum it up?
I mean, you've done a pretty good job of it so far, but if I'm completely honest, I don't feel like it's sunk in. You know, we're recording this. I've had very little sleep, as you can imagine, after a late night last night. And I just think it's going to take a couple of days to really realise what they've done. Newcastle United back in the Champions League, back at home for the first time in 20 years. And they haven't just beaten one of Europe's best. They've absolutely demolished them. And I would just want to echo what you said. People that have listened to this podcast for a long time will know that I always harp back to that Arsenal game, 2 seasons ago, Eddie Howe's first full season. They stopped Arsenal from qualifying for the Champions League at St James's Park. And I always harp back to that game as being, like an atmosphere I've never seen absolutely blown out the water by what we saw last night.
Unbelievable. My night started, ladies and gents, by walking up from the monument inside the police cordon with the PSG Ultras, and I've never seen anything like it. As I've said, on a standalone YouTube video, which should be going up later on our podcast channel on YouTube, it was kind of the moment of realization for me. Newcastle United are in Europe's elite competition because you read about these sort of fans in the papers, you see them on the telly, you see them online, but here they are in city centre Newcastle, walking to St James's Park ahead of a Champions League night. And I just had to take a step back. As they walked up towards the car park, I took a moment back and I was just like, wow, Newcastle are here. And this is all part of the atmosphere. And the best thing about it was for all their bravado and all their boisterous noise, and it was fantastic to see, they could not impact the result whatsoever.
Yeah, before the game started, when there was about half an hour to kick off, and all the PSG fans were already in the seat, and they were loud and they were going for it, and the drums were going, and I thought, okay, they've been here, they've done this before. But as you say, the home crowd, I thought, were absolutely fantastic. I think the moment for me, you've just touched on the moment you thought Newcastle were back. I mean, there was probably two for me. One is how busy that press box is. I mean, there was journalists there that probably have not been to this neck of the woods for a long time, and you can't blame them, given the standard of football in recent years. The press box was absolutely heaving. Our Chronicle Live photographer, Ian Buse, was there. He was texting me saying there's usually 15 to 20 photographers here. There's about 50. So that was, pre-game, it was special. You got the buzz behind the scenes. But for me, when I was sat there and there was about 10 minutes to kick off and all the usual pre-match songs started to play, the War Flags display started earlier than probably I anticipated it was going to. And I thought, okay, this is going to be special. And just a big shout out to War Flags. If anyone from the group or who donates listens to them, I thought last night was absolutely fantastic. A very simple display. I love the magpie in the Gallagher end, but also just the waivers as well. I just thought were absolutely fantastic. It just set the scene perfectly for the game.
Got plenty of people watching live on YouTube and on Facebook. Gavin says we were absolutely amazing. Jim says brilliant game. Glad to see Schär back. We've got people just buzzing about the result. Johnny says easily the best game I've been to. I think everyone's just absolutely over the moon with the result. And the atmosphere was absolutely superb. And yes, I totally echo what you're saying there about War Flags. A lot of planning went into last night's display, and it set the tone really. And the biggest takeaway that I got from the game is that Newcastle United felt at home in the Champions League. And I think that's largely part down to that this was the second game in the tournament. And I think getting the Milan game out of the way, that you could sense there was a bit of nervousness. Obviously, you've gone to a big stage and what have you, so I can totally understand why. First game in the Champions League in 21 years. But let's not forget, this is the first game at St James's Park in the Champions League in 21 years as well. But it just looked like they belonged. And I always hark back to Wembley in the League Cup. And it didn't feel that way. It felt, and I've said this many times, it felt like Newcastle United were kind of grateful to be there. They were still kind of caught up with, oh, maybe we don't deserve to be here. And it was totally different last night. And I think that sets them, really well going into the future, because they've got rid of that kind of, are we meant to be here kind of feeling.
Yeah, when the teams were lining up and the anthem was being played, and obviously it was such an emotional moment, and I was just looking across the Newcastle line and I was thinking, Sean Longstaff, Fabian Schär, Dan Burn, what are these players thinking? Just 2 years ago they were in a relegation battle. And then you look at PSG, who were stood there, they've done it before. Mbappe, Donnarumma, Hakimi, big names, big superstars. And I just thought, are we going to be sat here doing the Monday show on a Thursday, talking about how Newcastle United got overawed by the occasion? They couldn't handle the pressure of it. And I think credit to Eddie Howe, because, it's become a staple of his teams that doesn't matter whether it's City away or Burnley at home, they're going to go out and attack. They're going to go out and put it on the front foot. And I thought last night, we'll talk about PSG's performance later in the episode, I'm sure. And yes, they probably weren't at their best, but Newcastle made sure they weren't at their best. The press was like nothing I've ever seen from this Newcastle team, which says something, because they've been pressing for 2 seasons under Eddie Howe. They just did not give PSG a moment to breathe. And all of a sudden, 10 or 15 minutes in the game, I thought, actually, they aren't overawed by the occasion. The crowd were roaring them through it, helping them massively. But they matched PSG on the pitch, as well as showing them that they can deliver off the pitch as well.
They did match them. They beat them. And it didn't even take me 10 minutes to come to the conclusion. It was from the word go. The Newcastle United players just wanted it more. They ran quicker. They ran further than the PSG players. And you could just see, you could just sense that this was going to be their night. And it's interesting you mentioned the press, because I've got 3 or 4 ingredients to why last night was the perfect cake, if you want. I mean, that's a terrible analogy, but I've got a few ingredients to why I believe Newcastle United got the better of PSG, and one of them was, of course, the tactics, because Newcastle United pressed them, but when in possession, they wanted to go forward, and I don't think PSG are used to that at all. I think what happens is that PSG play teams who sit off them. PSG are allowed just to pass it round and just wait for that moment. And we saw it with the goal, really, to hit the opposition. But even when the defence clear it, it usually just comes back to PSG, and they can come again in wave after wave after wave. And granted, Newcastle only had 27% possession. But when they were on the ball, they wanted to go forward. They were not sitting back. They were not just going to pass it sideways. They were not just going to hoof it into touch. They made sure that every chance they got, they were going forward. And I do not think for a moment PSG expected that or knew how to deal with that, because usually I think teams are either scared of them, they fear them, or they show them too much respect. And Newcastle United, that was not on their mantra last night. That was not their approach. They were going to take the game to PSG, limited chances when in reality they had quite a few. And I think PSG were rattled by that as well.
Yeah, I saw that start on Twitter this morning about Newcastle having 26, 27 possession, and I thought, hang on, that can't be right. It didn't feel like a type of game where, usually you'd see a Manchester City team have 80% possession and the other team have 20, and you'd look at the game and you'd see the team, camped in front of their own goal and parking the bus. It didn't feel like that from Newcastle at all. It wasn't a performance where you thought they had less of the ball. I thought whenever they did have it, they worked really well. I think, look, I'm not going to claim I'm a better manager than Luis Enrique, the decorated coach that he is. But playing a 4-2-4, I mean, that midfield was so overrun from early doors. You could see the youngsters there, Emery, who was, L'Equipe have given him their man of the match. You could see he was overawed in the middle next to Ugarte. Bruno, Tonali, and Longstaff were running them out the park. I think 2 players that we might not touch on too much in this episode because they didn't score, and they usually do, and that's Gordon and Isak. But I thought what they gave Newcastle out of possession was unbelievable. The press, Isak's running off the ball is just absolutely fantastic. And they really set the tone, because when PSG had the ball at the back, they weren't just allowed to knock it about. the attacking players were making sure they were making mistakes, which they did. You know, Marquinhos allows Miggy to score by that poor clearance. It was just fantastic. It was for me arguably the best performance we've seen under Eddie Howe, and that's feels weird to say given they had 26% possession, but it was for me.
There's been many games of where Eddie Howe's got it tactically spot on. I think back to Brighton last season. I thought he absolutely superb. The Man United victory at St James's Park. And last night against PSG was just another example of where he's clearly done his homework, but also he's set his side up and he's done the old Joe Harvey trick where it's let's not worry about them, let them worry about us. And they bought into that, you know, and it was fantastic. And a lot of that performance last night was on belief. You know, yes, they've got Mbappe, but we're there. You're Sean Longstaff. You're wearing this Newcastle United shirt. You are living the dream of thousands of Geordie girls and boys to go out and you know, make it a reality. And he did that. And fantastic to see him get on the score sheet. And we'll talk about the Geordie lads in a second. But I just think the confidence that Eddie Howe's installed into these players, and a lot of them here before the takeover as well.
Well, I think that's the beautiful thing about last night is because, you know, so many people were building this clash as, oh, well, you know, it's the two money bags, and everybody knows if you've got anything half an interest in Newcastle, you know that's not the case. You know they haven't been spending at will. But that's what makes it even sweeter about last night. Miggy scoring. You know, he's been through the mire, you know, almost on the scrap heap. Sean Longstaff even more so. Fabian Schär couldn't even get a game above Kieran Clark and Federico Fernandez and Steve Bruce. And Dan Burn, I mean, you know, if anyone was going to score last night, I would have wanted it to be him. So that's what makes last night even more special. It wasn't, you know, a £63 million record signing scoring 3 or 4 goals. It was, you know, the heart and soul of this team scoring. And what a fantastic night it must have been for them.
Yeah, tremendous. Johnny says everyone on the pitch was incredible in their press and work rate, discipline and concentration. Not easy to do against an elite side. It all so proud. Alan says, I've always said possession means nothing unless you bury the ball into the onion bag. 100% Roger says. Andrew, with his cake and eating it. Yes, 100%. Robert says, agree, we didn't let them play. Better to go under the radar. Keep letting them talk about others. We'll keep surprising pundits and press experts, apparently. Lisa says, pure brilliant from the lads and the fans last night. And when you see the players, you know, fist bump in the air, every challenge, every tackle, and again, it happened very early on. You know, they've realized like what the fans can harness, and not that the fans needed any encouragement last night because they certainly didn't. But I think it just spells out the connection between the terraces and the squad. The squad, no, as soon as you celebrate a tackle, as soon as you celebrate a corner, that crowd's going to go up even louder. And I mean, they were already loud, but I think Anthony Gordon did it very early on. I think he got a challenge, and it went out for a goal kick, and he celebrated it like a goal, and the crowd just grew up a level, and the connection between the two is special. I think
it's became a Bruno special for me. Every game now, he celebrates more to the crowd winning a throw or losing a throw. You know, he's just made a tackle.
He should have traded more.
He should have. He generally should have completely. I mean, the first time he did it, it went viral on social media, and he clearly thought, I know it's going to get the clicks and the views after the game here, celebrating a throw. But you're right, and that Gordon moment I was actually going to bring up because it was very early in the game. Newcastle United pressing PSG at the back, and they didn't win anything. They won a goal kick, but it didn't matter. And I saw after the City game last week when Newcastle won, there was a few bitter, shall we say, fans on social media from other clubs saying, you know, Tim Pot Newcastle, they celebrate the press, they celebrate, you know, winning a goal kick. But the crowd last night, as we've already alluded to, got Newcastle through that game. You know, it's such a special atmosphere inside that ground when they do that. We saw it even against Burnley the other day. When Isaac won a throw in the corner and the Gallagher, you know, roars. It's became a real staple at St James's Park, and as you say, that connection is just forming and growing every single week.
Yeah, I mean, I would fully expect Eddie Howe to be making a part of his team talk. You know, tap into what it means to these fans and to the city. And you've got Sean Longstaff and Dan Burn, Jacob Murphy, Elliot Anderson able to tell that story, and Jamaal Lascelles as well, because he's been here long enough that he knows what it's all about. And I want to spend 5 minutes or so on
only
talking
5
about Jamaal Lascelles. I mean, because if we spend 5 minutes on everybody, it's going to be about a 4-hour show. And we know you've got to go and get your Tesco meal deal. Other supermarkets are available. Jamaal Lascelles, right, to come in out of the blue as he's done.
Mhm.
What's it, 5 starts in the last year?
Mhm.
Something like that. To replace Sven Botman is one thing. Arguably the best young defender in the Premier League. He's going to be a world superstar, right? He's been brilliant since he joined Newcastle United. So to replace him, that's one challenge. But to come in and replace him against PSG and you're pitting yourself up against Kylian Mbappe, Ramos, that's a totally other challenge. And he has risen to it. Fantastic against Burnley. Great last night. Jamaal Lascelles. This is why I went out and said, you keep Jamaal Lascelles. Unless he's asking to go, you do everything to keep him, because when called upon, he does not let this club down. And he's improved. He's somehow improved with limited game time. What a performance from the captain last night.
Before I go on to talk for about 15 minutes about how good Jamaal Lascelles was last night, I was texting a friend of mine after the game and he said, who did you think was man of the match? And for me, it was Jamaal Lascelles. I've seen a lot of people give it to Miggy. I know the Chronicle give it to Miggy. Don't know what you thought about man of the match.
Lascelles.
It was Lascelles for me. And I think Jamaal Lascelles, we've spoken about the stories about the other lads, how good it is for Longstaff, how good it is for Miggy Burton. But Jamaal Lascelles was the leader in that dressing room when it was at its worst under Steve McLaren. When there was absolutely no leaders in that dressing room that wanted to stand up, and Rafa Benitez saw this 22-year-old pick himself up, come out, front up for the mistakes that Newcastle were making. And look, I think if we'd rewound three months and we're back in the summer window and, Besiktas and other teams are interested, I think a lot of fans would have said, right, it's time for him to go. He's been a fantastic servant. But this is why you should never write off anyone in this squad when they're working under Eddie Howe, because the level of improvement he's shown, even last season when he started against Liverpool and City, I know they lost those 2 games, but he came out of it really well. His passing's improved, his man marking's improved, he wins everything in the air, never shirks a tackle. He was man of the match for me last night. I thought he was absolutely brilliant, and I'm just so glad. That must have been such a good moment for him to lead the club out in the Champions League. It was just so special.
Well, as the club tweeted, from Championship to Champions League, and he thoroughly deserves all the plaudits coming his way. There were a couple of really important blocks, interceptions in the second half when it looked Newcastle United were a little bit under pressure, but in truth, I was never afraid of PSG getting back into it, even after they got the first goal. But there was a moment when very near to Newcastle United's goal, it looked like Lascelles had been beaten for pace, and he just gets the block in.
For Dembele,
he didn't quite do it. Bruno, he didn't quite do it, and he's fist pumping in the air. But you could see he was, I think Dan Burn maybe went and hugged him, and I'm just so pleased for him. And when we talk about players coming back from injury, we always say, look, it's one thing to be fit, it's another thing to be match fit, and you can apply that to players who are not playing week in, week out.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow Jamaal Lascelles just always seems to slip straight into the side, doesn't look off the pace. And he must just be working so hard, day in, day out. We know he's a fantastic leader. That's been helped by the fact they've brought in, good leaders and Schär and Trippier, Dan Burn. He's been able to share the burden. He's openly spoken about that. And look, this may be his last season at Newcastle United. It probably is. There were teams after him in the summer. I'm glad he stayed on Tyneside. And look, to lead, as you said, the team out against PSG in the Champions League. What a moment for him.
Well, that's the thing. Whenever we talk to Eddie Howe about Jamaal Lascelles, and admittedly in the last couple of months, we haven't had to ask Eddie Howe too much about Jamaal Lascelles because he hasn't been playing. But just in the last week when he played against City and Burnley and last night, he's obviously came up a lot more. And every time Eddie Howe says, well, I'm not surprised. He knows what he puts in on the training ground. And for a player like Jamaal Lascelles, who looked like he was coming to the end of his career, but was offered the chance to stay, Eddie Howe said, if you want it to stay, you can have it. Jamaal Lascelles knows he has to put the work in behind the scenes. He isn't a passenger. Nobody's a passenger in this team. If you're going to stay and not play, you need to be ready at a moment's notice. And he has been. I mean, nobody expected that performance against City last week. We were talking on Monday how he was maybe a little bit, below par, not below par, but, he wasn't at the same level against Burnley. He was maybe caught out a few times. And then last night, he's just somehow managed to raise the game again.
He just seems to have cut the mistakes out of his game, taking the eye off the ball when he's in the air. Because what we've seen in the last 3 games, particularly against City and against PSG later on, when the opposition has just been trying to, pummel Newcastle with crosses, he's just got up and won headers. There was again a one late last night. He just gets his head to it. He's cleared it. And he just seems to be more focused, switched on, which again can't be that easy to do when you know you're probably going to play or start all of 5 games in a season, maybe if you're lucky. I mean, 5 games in the last years now, something like that. Like, you just got to applaud his work rate and commitment to Newcastle United. And I do. He's been absolutely fantastic. Great leader on and off the pitch. And I'm so happy that he got a start last night and, proved his worth as well. And it seems a lot of you guys watching live are as well. Ian says, agree 100%, outstanding, easily the man of the match, solid and balanced. Stu says, when you don't miss Botman, scissor all for Lascelles, a great team performance and more history made. 100% agree with all the comments coming in for Jamaal Lascelles. And look, we can talk about plenty of other people as well. Let's talk about Mr. Dan Burn. Because listeners to the podcast will know, one of our co-hosts, John Gibson, said that Dan Burn should come out of the side and be replaced by Schär and Trippier at left back. We had an argument about it, or a discussion. And, I think a lot of people have looked at Dan Burn and thought his time in the starting 11 at left back is maybe coming to an end. They've bought Lewis Hall. They've got Matt Targett there. But he just keeps on shutting the critics up. And again, last night, the goal aside, and we'll get onto the goal in a second, because what a moment for him. A solid defensive display again for Dan Burn. Against, with all due respect, players who should be burning for pace, who should be turning them inside out. And just somehow, and I don't know how, I don't know what the secret is, he just keeps these players who have got pace quiet.
Yeah, I had a couple of friends text me this week before the game, who I used to work with, saying, "Oh, are you excited for the game?" And every single one of them was mentioning, "Oh, I can't wait to see Mbappe against Burn." It was sort of this running joke, wasn't it, that Dan Burn, was all of a sudden coming up against these pacey wingers and he was going to struggle. And actually, last night, Dembele gets the ball down the right, and I was thinking, okay, here we go, first test. And I was thinking, how is Dan Burn going to react to it? And he does exactly what he's done the last year or 2 years. He just reacts to everything that throws to him. Doesn't matter how quick the winger is, doesn't matter how skillful they are, how good they are positionally. Dan Burn just tailors his game and sorts them out. And I thought last night, that was probably Newcastle's weak spot for them to target. And I just thought PSG just did not get a sniff down the right. There was one time in the second half he got caught out a little bit, but other than that, fantastic. And as I said at the top of the show, if anybody was going to score last night, it's a very, very close race, but I think it would just be Burn above Longstaff for me.
Who thinks? Yeah. Dan Burn,
he would have been the one that if there was to score. If there was a 1-0 win and only one player could score it would just be Dan Burn for me. So when that goal went in,
when you take 4,
exactly.
Positionally, Dan Burn is elite, says Giordano on YouTube. Noel says that was truly unbelievable last night from each and every one on the pitch. Let's face nothing near the strongest team. Just the guys running the legs. And that is a really good point. I think if you had everyone fit, would that be the starting 11 you choose? Many would pick Joe Linton, many would pick Callum Wilson. And I think bigger picture, it just, again, reaffirms that everybody is on the same sheet. Jamaal Lascelles said it after Burnley, because I think I didn't quite catch the question he was asked, but I'm assuming it was, how would you come back in and just slip straight in? And he said something on the lines of, the manager's got everyone working off the same page. And we can see that again last night, because it doesn't matter who comes in, everyone just puts in a shift and rises to the challenge. And Eddie Howe must just be rubbing his hands with glee, knowing that eventually he's going to have Joe Willock back. Eventually he's going to have Joe Linton. But let's not make any bones about it. I know Tonali started last night, but that would have been a difficult decision to leave Elliot Anderson out. And actually, Elliot Anderson, I felt, did better than Tonali when he came on the pitch. And again, you look ahead to Sunday, you look ahead to the games after the national, but you're thinking, if you're Eddie Howe, I've got some tough decisions to be made here. It was solely based on form and work rate.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you go back just 2 or 3 weeks ago when Newcastle United were heading into this international break, they'd lost 3 in a row, and all of a sudden people like yourself maybe were going, well, they should have signed a 6, or they should have signed a left back, or they need a third striker. I don't know who would say that, but anyway, people still saying that. People were saying, and look, it's the reactionary nature of football. When you lose 3 in a row, you're all of a sudden going to try and pick fault. But actually, you look around that squad, and even though they've only potentially signed 2 this summer that have actually been used, I mean, Livramento and Hall, great signings, but we haven't seen them. They've already got amazing strength and depth. I mean, last night, no Harvey Barnes, no Wilson, no Willock, no Joe Linton, no Botman. 150, 160 million pounds worth of talent. And were they missed? No, of course they weren't. So,
I've got to say that when Isaac went down with a head injury,
well, yeah,
I was flapping a little bit.
I was looking at that thinking, oh, that's just me. Was it just going to bring up this Thursday strike? I think
I
I'm
saw
on.
you turn around in the press box
and look
looking for
you
us.
to try and hide. But look, their strength and depth is absolutely incredible. I mean, as you say last night, when these 5 players come back, I mean, Joe Willock, bless him, so good last season. How did he get back into this team above Anderson and Tonali, who are at the minute struggling to get into the team? I mean, Harvey Barnes as well, Gordon playing out of his skin, Miggy back on form. It's just fantastic to see the depth that they've got.
Just on Anderson, because I felt he was in with a real shout of starting
Yeah,
against PSG.
same.
And I know Tonali, he's still clearly not up to scratch. He's not up to the levels that we know he can get to, but there was enough glimpses last night just to reframe what a player he's going to be. There were some really good moments in the first half where he was getting stuck in. There was a burst of pace up one of the wings,
left, yeah.
and I just thought, wow, he is moving with speed. There was a great moment between he wins the ball back and he plays it to Anthony Gordon, continues his run, and Gordon should have played it back off to him, but he then goes inside and Gordon wins a foul. You can see Tonali's raging because he wanted that ball. And if Gordon had given to him, Tonali was through. There's enough there. It's maybe going to take longer than we all like, all hoped, all expected, but he's going to be a quality player.
Well, I mean, on the match preview, me and John Anderson both,
John
Gibson, sorry, Gibbo. Me and John Gibson both said about Elliot Anderson that we would start him over Sandro Tonali, and that was, purely because of the form that he showed in recent weeks. Tonali's maybe dropped off a little bit from his fine start, but last night you could see why Howe would throw Tonali in there, against the PSG side who have been there and done it. You probably need a player who's, got the Champions League experience, and I think last night Tonali showed. It was a good decision to start him. As you say, the energy he showed was fantastic. He looked very, very fit, I thought, compared to the recent games. And then, as you say, Howe had the option to bring Anderson on when the legs were maybe getting a bit tired. And Anderson looked, as he has done every time he's played this season, like he belongs at this level, in this team, with these players. Full of energy, very, very good on the ball, confident, composed. Yeah, I mean, as I said, for Willock and Joelinton, and that midfield now is looking so tasty. You've got 6 or 7 good options.
Fantastic when everyone's fit. And Bruno, tremendous. It looked like his stage, full of energy, some great passing, some great running. But do you know, Sean Longstaff stood out. Of the 3, Sean Longstaff stood out for me. Now, again, his goal aside, I thought he was absolutely superb. And what I really loved about it was that he was berating absolutely everyone. Now, in this second half, when PSG were maybe just getting a little bit on top in the middle and there was gaps starting to form, Sean Longstaff turning around, telling Bruno, get back in position, telling Anthony Gordon, you've got to be coming up. That's the kind of leader without the armband that Newcastle United need and have, to be fair, with 3 or 4 other players. But Sean Longstaff, if you're looking for someone who knows what last night meant to the fans of the city, he's exactly the definition of that. And he was not going to let the standards drop. Didn't matter Newcastle was 3-0, 3-1 up. He was not going to let anyone drop below the standards that he was setting, that he knew Newcastle United needed to keep the lead. He was absolutely superb. Letting his mouth go, exactly what you want to see. Shouting it at his teammates, organisation. A brilliant performance from Sean Longstaff.
He actually let his mouth go a little bit with the referee as well in the second half. I thought he was going to talk himself into a booking after he got penalised for a foul on the edge of PSG's box. But yeah, he's sort of quietly emerged as this leader in the group. Last season it was all about how Howe was calling him as unsung hero, his performances were going under the radar. Well, now, every single game we talk about how good Longstaff was, how critical he is to this team, how the stats are the stats are mind-blowing when he starts compared to when he doesn't. The balance he offers them, the shape, out the ball, how good he is, the runs in behind that he's making. He's just the improvement level. In terms of, everybody talks about how many players have actually improved already. How, in terms of the level raised that he's got to be,
he's up there with Joelinton, isn't
player that is, Joelinton that have done the most. He's so crucial to this team now.
It is England's squad announcement day, 2:00, I think it is, and we're going to keep this short and not so sweet. Sean Longstaff, does he deserve a call up? Yes. Sean Longstaff, will he get a call up? Probably not.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd be very surprised. But that's England's loss, isn't it? He thoroughly deserves one. Let's talk about then the goals. We'll start with Miguel Almiron's goal. It is a fantastic finish because the Miggy of old is putting that into the Leazers. He is calm. He's clinical. He just takes his time. He seems to take an age of it. And this is the new Miggy. There's no rush. There's no rush at all. He's just clinical, and it's a wonderful finish. It's a lot harder a finish than I think some might give him credit for.
Any other player would have taken that on their right foot, but not Miggy. He's going to use that's what I mean. He's going to use that extra half a second to make sure he's put it on his left, and it's a good job he did because it was a very good finish. But as I said earlier, Newcastle forced that goal. I mean, Marquinhos has no right playing it out there as he did. Great interception by Miggy, and then the follow up, to beat the players running in. Fantastic. But go on.
I was just going to say, Miggy, if you're watching, I'm really sorry.
Oh, well, that's funny enough, actually, because
to remain as chairman of the fan club.
No, I think we should leave it to the comments. I think people watching live on Facebook, there's 155 years watching this live. Please let me know if you think Andrew should reclaim his title as the chairman of the Miggy fan club. I personally think you don't deserve it. I think you got rid of him.
Clinical friends. I mean, clinical. I'm obsessed by saying the word clinical. It's just what Newcastle United are now. Look them up in the dictionary, by clinical. Look, yeah, Miggy. I mean, just fantastic finish and work rate. So you got man of the match. What were you going to say before I interrupted you with my plea to remain as part of the fan club?
I can't remember.
Well, shall we go on to the next goal? And Mr. Dan Burn gets in the header, and that was a fantastic run of play, passage of play, some really important saves by the PSG keeper Bruno forcing a great save. I think it was a Lascelles header and a great save, and then Bruno just picking Dan Burn out at the back post with a tremendous header. And again, if we're looking for the moment which said Newcastle United wanted it more, Dan Burn quite literally putting his neck on the line to get to that header. That's there. And, obviously there's a bit of confusion whether it was in or not, and then the offside. And I mean, let me rant about VAR in a second.
No, come on.
I took far too long.
The biggest night in Newcastle's modern history, and we're going to talk about VAR. Who cares? They allowed it.
They did in the end. Yes, okay.
And actually, I've actually seen a couple of PSG fans fuming on Twitter that Lascelles handballed it in the build-up.
Yeah, but that's what I thought the flag went up for. I thought the flag went up because he handballed it, but obviously they decided not. And then I thought VAR in the Champions League was going to be quick and concise and better than the Premier League. Arguably not, but as you say, it doesn't matter. I was in front of Jermaine Genius and Darren Fletcher for where the BT commentators were on the gantry, and everyone turning around and Genius. This shows you the confusion. They obviously had the benefit of the replays, and he was telling everyone it looks a goal, but there was still another 2 minutes before it actually got around the stadium that it was a goal. It just seemed a little bit. Obviously it doesn't spoil the moment because Dan Burn still got to celebrate, but what did you make of the goal and just the wait to see it actually confirmed?
The wait was really confusing because, funnily enough, the monitor on our desk in the press box went off about 30 seconds before the goal, so we had no access to the replay. And the journalist next to me turned around and went, "Well, I thought in the Champions League, if the ball's over the line, the ref gets a message. So why are we waiting?" And then I was like, "Well, okay, it's probably going to be an offside." But even then, we had no clue who was offside. We were thinking, "Well, can it be Bruno? Surely there was players on the line." Personally, I had no idea what was going on until I sort of went on social media and saw it. It did take a long time. Maybe they were checking the handball, which they've clearly missed. They're checking the offside. It was miles over the line. So I don't know. But at the end of the day, it went Newcastle's favor.
Can we just make a point on that? The fact that we're talking about this second goal, Dan Burn's the one who scored it, and we're talking about Jamaal Lascelles potentially handballing the ball in the box. What on earth are half of Newcastle's defence doing in the box?
Well, it was from the Trippier free kick, wasn't it? That's what that's what started.
But I think that shows you, because a lot of teams might just try and sit back, get ready for the counter. But there they were, because obviously they've cleared it, they've come back in. Tremendous. What will that mean to Dan Burn?
I mean, wasn't he? It was probably 10 years ago he was pushing trolleys in Asda, playing in non-league, and now he's scoring for his boyhood club in the Champions League. I mean, literally, us two sat here as Newcastle United fans, you can't even imagine what it must be like. I mean, it must be so surreal. I just think it was just fantastic.
Your reaction last night to me was, "My God, mint." So imagine what Dan Burns' I mean, he'll be dancing all over that dressing room, right?
I mean, him and Longstaff must be sat there thinking, "What on earth have we just done?" The pair of us. Not just Burns scoring, Longstaff getting his goal is fantastic. I mean, it could have been more perfect. The only way it could have been more perfect was Paul Dummett or Elliot Anderson coming off the bench and scoring.
He needs to go. I would have loved it being Anderson to get a goal. And to be fair, the Schär strike, the chap next to me thought it was Elliot Anderson.
I thought it was Bruno, because I thought there's no way Fabian Schär is that high up the pitch in stoppage time. So I was writing in my report, "Oh, it's Bruno scoring." Oh, that's not. It's Fabian
Top-class
Schär.
journalism
Exactly.
here, Chronicle Live, ladies and gents. Before we talk about Longstaff's goal, I'll go jump back into the comments, because big news, ladies and gents. Aaron's mum has thrown her hat into the ring to become the chairman of the Miguel Almiron fan club. She says, "Andrew, you don't deserve it. I think you'll find I threw my hat into the ring weeks ago. Never doubted Miguel Almiron." Well, Aaron's mum, if you send Aaron in with a cake, because I know you make lovely cakes, we've had one cake already, I'll hand over the reins to you. You become the chairman of the Miguel Almiron fan club. Let's talk about that Sean Longstaff goal, because lovely passage play down the right. And again, I go back to wanting it more. PSG just switched off and allowed Longstaff just to make a run into the box. It was a fantastic run. But if you're Luis Enrique defensively, you're absolutely fizzing at that. Great little through ball by, I think it was Trippier, and Longstaff. He's caught the keeper out.
Mm-hmm.
I think the keeper thinks he's going to square it. The keeper still should save it. It's an awful bit of goalkeeping. But for Sean Longstaff to have in his mind, "I'm hitting this, I'm scoring this," it's exactly what you want from a midfielder when he breaks into the box.
I mean, there's absolutely no way, and rightly so, you should ever be squaring that. A local lad in the Champions League in that position, you've got to have a goal. So I'm very glad he did. Yeah, very good play by Trippier, as you say. I think he did catch Donnarumma. But Luis Enrique spent the entire first half absolutely fuming with his players. He was pacing up and down the touchline. He was swearing in Spanish at his coaches. And then you think, right, they've had an absolute hairdryer from the manager in the dressing room. PSG are going to come out second half, keep it tight, maybe get a goal back, and then bang, within a couple of minutes, Longstaff scored, game over. Yeah, just an absolutely fantastic move and a fantastic finish and a fantastic moment for him.
Johnny says, "Bravery to make that run. A lot of players would have tried to tuck in and hold onto possession." Yeah, great run from Sean Longstaff. We're getting to what we don't know, the handball rule. It wasn't deemed deliberate. Well, that's what it was. That's what it wasn't.
Or maybe it's like the Gordon one. To be fair,
these rules change all the time. That I'm sick of trying to guess what the rules actually mean this week. Then, so that's 3-0, which is just unbelievable. I think everyone took a picture of the scoreboard, grainy photographs from where we were sitting in the stadium. Then Lucas Hernandez gets one back, and it was it was on one hand poor defending from Newcastle, on the other it was a great bit of play from PSG. Lovely dink ball over the top, and a nice little finish. And you've got the ultras celebrating, but straight away the crowd, the St James's Park crowd, the Newcastle United fans were up on their feet. They were backing their players, and there was not a moment for that goal to sneak in to Newcastle United's mindset, I don't think, because that could have been a rocky turning point, but I don't think it was, and I think that was largely part down to the fans. It looks like you're about to disagree with me.
I'm going to slightly disagree with you, and maybe it's because of where I was in the stadium, but I thought when the PSG scored, it went to 3-1. There was about a 5-minute period where PSG started to attack a little bit more. And yes, I agree. The crowd, got Newcastle United through it. I don't think the players looked nervous, but around me, you could just sort of start to feel whenever PSG were attacking, there was a little bit more quiet. I felt that it was a little bit nervy. And then as soon as Newcastle cleared the lines, the roar was bigger. They were cheering every clearance and tackle towards the end. I think when it was at 3-1, I was sat there and I wrote this in the blog at the time. I think it was weird saying it because they had a 2-goal cushion, but I thought Newcastle needed another just to sort of, regain that 3-goal
I disagree.
advantage.
I felt, at least where I was sitting, the crowd was straight on their feet, making sure that it doesn't impact them on the pitch. Maybe 30 seconds, 2 minutes, Newcastle United give the ball away a couple of times, and they look like they were just starting to lose their shape.
It,
But again,
it wasn't a long. It wasn't a long
wasn't.
period. It was a 2 to 5 minute period after the
It was
first
just settle
goal.
down.
Yeah.
You're in control. Yeah, get refocused, keep your shape, and then Newcastle United were back on top. And I never felt PSG were going to come back into that. And I know a lot of people might be thinking, oh, Barcelona 3-2, Newcastle were 3-0 up, and by the end of that game, Newcastle were hanging on, but not here. Newcastle were really, really comfortable. And PSG, they're a team in transition with Luis Enrique. And I will say, the 3 or 4 times they got the better of Newcastle down the wings, the way they moved and passed the ball,
Yeah.
what a delight to watch. Admittedly, I was doing it through my hands because I was scared of where it was going to end up in those instances. But they were few and far between. But a great team when they were clicking. Thankfully, it didn't happen for them on the night. And then you've got Fabian Schär. Fabian Schär doing what Fabian Schär does. He doesn't score simple goals, this man. What a strike. He's slipping over as well. What a goal.
Yeah, I love the scream. I've got a question for you. I've got a question for the people in the comments. Got a question for the people listening. Fabian Schär, surely now the best pound for pound Newcastle United signing. £3 million?
I don't know, It depends where you set the limit, innit? Like, look, I'm going to say, I mean, Iosi Perez will be in that discussion there. A lot of goals. I know we're talking about Fabian Schär on the back of a fantastic Champions League display. But you could quite easily argue Kieran Trippier at 12 million. You could quite easily argue Nick Pope, could come in that category. Fantastic. I think he's been on a journey because you have to remember he wasn't Rafa Benitez's first choice. He was second or third, if that. Then, like you say, he couldn't get in ahead of Fernandes and Clark. And he's come on leaps and bounds. We were talking about Lascelles, just gaining that little bit of focus that sometimes he lacked. Fabian Schär, that was his main downfall. He would often just switch off at the wrong time, try something a little bit clever, and it would come back to bite him. There was one example last night when he had to make a really good recovery, and he did. He dilly-dallied on the ball. He got back and won it, which was tremendous. But as a whole, he has cut out the mistakes out of his game, and he just, instead of trying to be clever when he needs just to defend, that part of his game is gone now, and we know he can pass a ball. We know he can hit a ball. A tremendous performance last night. Pound for pound,
he's in the conversation.
Oh, of course he was.
Agree.
I mean, Stu's in there. Andy Cole was a bit of a bargain going back. I mean, Sir John Hall would say Rob Lee.
Yeah, I was going to say Rob
there's
Lee
a lot of players coming into that discussion. Maybe under the Mike Ashley era, if you categorise it like that.
It's a nice way to
I think Iosi Perez maybe would push him, but yeah, definitely in discussion. And just what a strike and what a perfect way to round the night off.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of reasons why we've seen such an improvement in Fabian Schär, but I wouldn't underestimate how much he has benefited from playing next to Kieran Trippier in that defence. And I think the same can be said for Jamaal Lascelles.
You can say it about Miguel Almiron. You can say it pretty much about everybody. You can say it about
everybody.
Kieran
I think
Trippier. We haven't even spoken about Kieran Trippier in this episode.
I know. But I think playing alongside him for such an amount of time, you can see how better Lascelles is playing on the right when Trippier's there next to him. But for Fabian Schär, as we've touched on, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but another one who has been through the journey. It's a fantastic story. The scenes last night when he scored were something special because it was, I mean, the game was already done, but it was officially job done. And as I say, there's probably no better way to win it. I mean, falling down, slipping, and still managed to leave Donnarumma with no chance. It was just absolutely fantastic.
Gary says, what a game, what a performance. Lump in my throat when Schär scored. Didn't sleep well because of the adrenaline. You're not the only one.
You're not alone, yeah.
Lascelles stopped a key PSG chance. Dembele clean through, getting the other side of him, of Burn, but Lascelles got back and put him off. That was a key moment, says John. Yeah, 100% agree. We've referenced that earlier in the show when we were talking all things Jamaal, Lascelles. Like you mentioned earlier in the show as well, Anthony Gordon, again, just proven. I mean, if we're talking about bargains, it's 40 million a bargain for him. He didn't look out of place on the Champions League stage. What a season he's having.
I'm not sure you can call 40 million a bargain, but he's certainly justifying why Newcastle United was so desperate to play that money when not a lot of teams or not a lot of fans certainly thought he was worth that. As I said at the very start of the show, he didn't do too much with the ball last night, but the energy he's got, and I mean, the England announcement's coming up at 2 p.m. this afternoon. Gordon surely in with a shout after the injury to Saka, surely in with a shout after the injury to Eze. But part of me, while it would be fantastic for him to be in that squad, thinks he's got to be close to a burnout. Eddie Howe wants to give him a rest and he can't now because Harvey Barnes. Would it be the worst thing in the world if he didn't go away with England? I'm not too sure. I think, as I say, if he goes away, it would be absolutely fantastic. He earns it. He deserves it. He should be in the squad. And hopefully, over the summer, he was fantastic and carried on that form. But I don't know. Maybe it's not the worst thing if he doesn't go.
Do you know what? I don't know. I think he's just got energy to burn.
Well,
he just looks so fit and his stamina is out of this world. Let's hear from Eddie Howe now, who was asked about last night and the impact on the Geordie fans and, of course, the Geordies in the team. This is what Newcastle's head coach had to say after Newcastle beat PSG 4-1.
Yeah, as I said, I really do respect the people that the Geordies, as you say, that have had sort of lifelong associations with the club and understand what it means to play for Newcastle, have a unique experience really. So for Sean to score as he did and play like he did, and for Dan, they're amazing moments in their careers. But going from the difficult moment that we were in to now, I think it's a great lesson for us not to get ahead of ourselves. We've come a long way in a short period of time, but we want to keep going and we take nothing for granted. So amazing night, but we've got to continue to work hard for more.
You know what I love about Eddie Howe? He's just always got his feet on the ground. Always got his feet on the ground. And there we go again, not getting ahead of himself, not allowing him to run away with a victory, not claiming to be the best manager in the world. I love it. I love it because, that is one of the biggest weaknesses of certain football managers, that when they get a result like this and a performance like this, they allow themselves to believe the press. And Eddie Howe knows that the best way for this Newcastle United team to be successful is to always be striving for more. It was the best performance I have seen at St James's Park in my lifetime, but he'll be looking at it and thinking, well, this wasn't right. And I love that because he's always looking for ways to improve the performance.
As weird as it sounds, if Newcastle United go and get beat on Sunday, in Eddie Howe's mind, it will be, a really disappointing week. And he's the only manager I know that could come out and within the first 60 seconds of a post-match press conference where you've just won your first Champions League game, 4-1 at home, fantastic performance. You already talked about a Premier League game in 3 days' time, but that is just the Eddie Howe that we've came to know and love.
Well, it's interesting because you look at Alexander Isak and he looked absolutely knackered by the end of the game by the time. What happens on Sunday? Because if Callum Wilson's injury was bad enough for him to miss last night, my view would be that it's bad enough to miss Sunday. Isak looked knackered. Do you potentially? Gordon's suspended, so he can't play. So what do you do?
I think Isak will be all right, to be fair, to play. He managed to soldier on. He should be all right. Wilson, Eddie Howe insisted they were going to make a late call on him last night. Doesn't mean that he's maybe going to be fit enough for the bench on Sunday. After all, he does love playing and scoring against West Ham.
Devastated for him to miss out.
Yeah, good. I was listening to a little bit of his podcast during the week where he was talking to Antonio about missing out, and you could tell in his voice he was absolutely good. He was saying, "Oh well, the atmosphere's good and buzzing for the lads," but you could tell there was a real sadness
if he wasn't.
But he then went on to say there'll be 50-60 games this season. He knows he's going to have to be managed. He knows that he's going to have setbacks. He'll just be now fully focused to making sure he's fit for Dortmund and Milan.
Jordan 18 says, pound for pound, Eddie Howe is the best signing Newcastle United have made. Stu Mag says, Eddie Howe alluded to confidence a few games back. He has that now. He also has the mindset and attributes to help keep the heads level moving forward. And that is absolutely key, not getting ahead of yourselves, as he referenced and as I've just said. There we've got Gordon says, you could put Anderson or Tino Lieberman. That's again. I do like the wild and wonderful tactical approaches here. We've got Roger saying, I feared that the goal was offside. I had no doubt it crossed the line. We've got Declan Fraser saying, if everyone is still injured, it's Murphy, Anderson, and Miggy. Let's hope for some recoveries. And then obviously into the national break. Hopefully time for those to rest and recuperate. Talk us through then, Aaron, the moment that Champions League anthem sounded. Did you get a little bit teary?
You know what it is? I thought I would, given that I was very teary hearing it at Sam Fender. I thought, oh God, I'm going to be an absolute mess. When when it rolls around in September. But funny enough, I wasn't teary. Didn't get the look through. I was very emotional. I enjoyed it. I was the moment we look forward to, but I don't think I was as
I was more
caught up.
just like mouth open, like, wow.
Yeah. It was just trying to process it, wasn't it? Like,
Yeah.
okay, this is actually happening for real. You know, the wait is over. And I was more just thinking about the players, weirdly enough. I was just looking at them, trying to gauge their reaction. I mean, I was just feeling so happy for Longstaff and Byrne and the players who have dreamt of it. Although I did watch a video on my way into work this morning that I took of the anthem being played, and I was like, okay, now I can watch it back and I'm not at work. It was just fantastic.
Absolutely brilliant to see. And of course, Dortmund next at St James's Park. What message does the result and performance last night send out to AC Milan and to Borussia Dortmund?
You only have to look at Bild, the biggest paper in Germany this morning, to say that they've spoken of a sensational result for Newcastle, blowing apart Group F. Dortmund now. It was funny. Luis Enrique on Tuesday was asked about Newcastle, and he said, "Oh well, we're not underestimating them. They're the team from pot 4 that nobody wanted." But you get the sense that maybe he thought, "Okay, well, I've watched the AC Milan performance, who, really should have probably won that game with the chances they created. We should be okay." Now, I mean, not just PSG, Milan, and Dortmund. Every team in the competition will be thinking, we do not want to go to St James's Park for a night like that. So it sent a clear message that Newcastle United aren't just going to be the whipping boys of the group. They can beat anyone on their day, especially at home. And I mean, now look at that group. Milan, Dortmund drawing last night is a huge result.
We haven't mentioned it. But ladies and gents, it's not fake. It's not fake news. Newcastle United, top of their Champions League group.
Well, you know what it is? It's funny. We're 52 minutes into the podcast. We haven't mentioned the fact that Newcastle are top of the group. And unbelievably, I know we're drawing this to an end. We haven't spoken about the best player in the world, Kylian Mbappe. And that just goes to show how anonymous he was last night, how fantastic Newcastle United did to keep him quiet. And yeah, look, they're back.
Well, you say that, right? It's quite funny because people in the comments are talking about Mbappe, and I've had at least 2-3 different pockets in which Mbappe has been found in this morning, which goes to show you just how well Newcastle United have done, and yeah, they kept him quiet. I mean, look, the touches he had, there was that chance, wasn't it, for Dembele early in the first half. You can see he's a quality player, but someone has said to me, and he's not the only person that has referenced this morning or last night. His mind's clearly elsewhere. We know he's going to end up with Real Madrid, and you can just see that in his performance. And I just think PSG as well, they look like a team who are just starting out, and they will be a force, I think, in a couple of years if Luis Enrique gets the time and haven't started the season brilliantly. But that aside, that doesn't really matter. Newcastle United did the job over them. Forget the fact that they're on a journey, PSG. Newcastle United, took advantage and forced them into looking like a bang average team.
Yeah, they did. Look, there's no doubt that it's not the PSG of old, but you still looked around that team last night and thought, okay, they've got absolute superstars. I thought Hakimi looked good at times when he was going forward. And Mbappe, as you say, there's just that. It was fantastic to see him at St James's Park, and it was good to see that actually he didn't have a very good game. But as you say, you looked at him and thought, okay, I think on his day, it's clear he's the real deal.
Well, I was looking forward to seeing Ramos as well, but they didn't do anything.
Poor. Dembele, I didn't think was very good at all, although I'm not too sure.
Credit to Newcastle, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, it's what you're saying. Newcastle didn't afford them the respect. They didn't just let them have the ball, and they didn't just sit back and have 26% possession while not doing anything with it. They were after them from minute one, and they forced the mistakes that they made.
I did enjoy PSG's tactic, though, on Newcastle corners to keep a winger or a forward man right on the halfway line, like literally nearly in the dugout. And I thought that was quite clever. Anthony Gordon didn't even see, I think it was Dembele at one point, and give the ball back to him. An interesting tactic. But, a fantastic night for Newcastle United. And goodness me, I just can't quite believe it.
Yeah, somebody wrote in the comments, I'm not sure who it was because it was a while ago, someone said still on cloud nine. I think that's just the generic feeling around the city.
Now, if the gentleman that I was speaking to at half time last night is watching, he said he would be, he can back me up. I said Newcastle United would get 4 goals. I said they would score 2 more in the second half, and I was proved right.
Yeah, sure you did.
I'm sure you'll back me up when he's watching.
I'm sure.
But he said he was going to have a bad head as well, celebrating last night's victory. And why not? Because the town was buzzing afterwards. I was walking back to the garage, and this is the final thing I want to make is the point as well. It's not just about Newcastle United as a football club; it's about the city as well. And when these fans come and visit, the benefit on the city, the money it brings in. It's the whole bigger picture, and it's much more than just about the football club.
Yeah, it was fantastic to see the atmosphere pre-match. I know there was a few scuffles with the PSG fans, but overall, it looks like there's been no serious incident like there was in Milan, which is very good to see. As you touched on, not to get too boring and technical, but I mean the economic benefit to the city is huge with these three teams coming. And just the fact Champions League nights are back on Tyneside. And for a lot of people there last night, for myself, I'd never actually been to a Champions League game on Tyneside. And
you youngins.
Well, I think this might be a good place to end the show, and you might have a little bit more of an insight to me, given that you're of maybe a different generation. We were talking about this in the press room last night, and I can't really comment given that I was in nappies at the time. Is last night bigger than Barca?
Well, on nappies, I bet a lot of you guys went to the pub. I went home and changed nappies. That was
too
how
much
I
information.
celebrated.
But
what was the question?
Is last night bigger, more monumental than Barcelona all those years ago?
You see, I was only 7 though. So I mean, my marker would be Juventus 1-0 Andy Griffin.
It was certainly bigger than that.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is, like I said, that all the years I've been following Newcastle United, this is the biggest and best, and this is because Newcastle were more in control against PSG. Against Barcelona, they were hanging on in the end. They were in full control. I think they could have gone another half an hour, and Newcastle probably would have added a fifth and sixth. That's how good they were last night. I don't even think it compares to Barcelona, to be truthful, without a shadow of a doubt. I think this is a result and a performance in a league of its own. And hopefully we see another one against Dortmund, another one against Milan. But it has set the bar, certainly. And I think everyone that was there, everyone that was watching at home, they'll remember this game for a long, long time to come. And people that were there against Barcelona, Tino Hattrick, this will be their Barcelona. We talk about that Barcelona game now, 25 years, 30 years after? We'll be talking about this one for years to come. And why not? What a tremendous performance. Ladies and gents, this has been the Everything is Black and White podcast, the Monday show on a Thursday. No trivia today because we're going to keep that to Mondays. But thank you very much for letting us reflect on Newcastle United 4, PSG 1. It's a privilege to be coming in your ears and on your screens. Hit the subscribe button, click follow, leave us a rating and review as well, and share this out as well. Let everyone reflect and enjoy Newcastle United's fantastic start at home in the Premier League. Champions League against PSG. It's been a pleasure for myself and Aaron. We'll see you guys very soon.